Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I am your host, Scott Brady, and I'm joined today by my good friend, JJ. Now, JJ works for the Foreign Service, and he works in particular with travel security and security considerations for Americans that are traveling abroad. Now, he is based in sub-Saharan Africa, and I had the chance to meet up with him when I was in Kenya, and we talked at great length about travel security. Now, this applies to not only Americans, but to anyone else traveling around the world. We do the deep dive into documentation, ways to prepare for your trip. We also talk about things to do, things not to do, how to enroll in the S.T.E.P program, and some other really important considerations for the traveler. So please enjoy my conversation with JJ. So, JJ, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's a huge honor for me to interview you, and I'm also so excited about this because you have so many actionable pieces of advice for people that are traveling. You've done a lot of travel around the world in all forms of auspices, so it's just a really exciting opportunity for our podcast to be able to spend this time with you.
Yeah, likewise, it's a great honor for me as well to join in on the podcast. I think I've heard every episode, probably.
Awesome.
So to be able to join in and if I can contribute in any way, that definitely is worthwhile.
Sure. Well, and we can start off by assuring all of the listeners that we're both crazy because we own Land Rover Defenders.
That's right. Yeah, I think that was that initial connection. We definitely share the hardships.
Although yours definitely has the best headlights I've ever seen on a classic Defender. I mean, they actually worked. I can actually see you behind me.
No, yeah, it's been a process. Sure. I think as most say, but it's been worthwhile.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I think it would be fun to hear a little bit about what sparked your interest in working for the federal government and working then internationally. What was the first sparks for you on that?
Well, I'm from a border community. I'm from Yuma, Arizona, and I grew up crossing the border to see family all the time. And at the time, it didn't seem like anything special. Or like that was even crossing an international border.
Sure.
At the time. I think that later in life, as growing up in Arizona, we had off-road vehicles and we'd get out. But when I was about 19 years old, I did a church mission that took me to Colombia in South America. And when I was there, I really caught the bug.
Sure.
On being overseas, and it was something really special. And so when later in life, I had the opportunity to combine, working and living overseas, and off-road travel, and with vehicles, it all kind of came to a kind of a melting point. So
sure. Yeah. And now you get to do literally all of that.
Yeah.
On a regular basis, which is extremely cool. And if you were to give some advice to a listener that maybe has some of the same aspirations, what would be a couple pieces of advice for someone who wanted to work for the federal government internationally?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about, where I work with the federal government. So I work for the U.S. Department of State, and the U.S. Department of State is a huge organization. I am with the U.S. Foreign Service. So the U.S. Foreign Service is a subset of the U.S. Department of State. The officers of the U.S. Foreign Service work primarily overseas, and we're stationed at more than 270 locations around the world. So the U.S. government's widely represented around the world with embassies and consulates. And the U.S. Foreign Service is made up of about 13,000 Foreign Service officers. There's about 11,000 civil service officers.
Wow.
And 45,000 local nationals. These are individuals in each location which work for the U.S. government, but they're from that specific country.
Sure.
So like here in Kenya, we have a large number of people which they help provide us the proper context so that we can carry out the U.S. mission, the U.S. diplomatic mission abroad.
Well, and it just seems that the opportunity to be able to interact with local agencies would have it would support your efforts, I would think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that in every place that I've worked at, it's just been really positive, the relationships I've developed. with, not only at the official level, but also with, just your everyday person that you interact with. Here in Kenya, it's been great.
The Kenyan people are wonderful.
Yeah.
Truly wonderful.
Yeah,
people.
some of the most friendly people I think I've literally met in my life.
Yeah. And they seem to be genuinely interested in travel too, which I haven't found in all of the African countries. Usually when you say you've driven from Cape Town to wherever, they don't know how to relate to that. Whereas Kenyans seem to be very interested in, did you go through Mozambique, and did you go? They really have a good understanding of Africa, and I think that's because Kenya, especially Nairobi, is such an international hub. You have the UN has a big presence here. I mean, the U.S. Embassy is like a college campus. It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people in Nairobi come from different parts of Kenya.
Sure.
And then if you even get out to Mombasa, I mean, that is one of the oldest port cities in the world.
Yeah.
And so it's, a lot of people from all over the place. And they are pretty curious if you say you've been to parts of the country, and especially if it's a part that they're from.
Yeah.
It just really gets them excited.
Yeah, they can really relate to it for sure. So let's try to tie it back into your own experience as an overlander, because that was one of the ways that we were able to connect, is your passion for overland travel. And you identified that we were going to be driving through Africa, and you reached out. But tell me what you love about overland travel, and how has your job helped you kind of become even a better overland traveler?
Yeah. For me, it's about just discovering new places. And as a child, growing up, I would always look at, maps, for example, and see these faraway places. And I remember getting one of those country books about Egypt and seeing the pyramids and thinking, I want to go here one day. But, I didn't have the means as a kid. And we didn't do a lot of travel growing up, some trips, here and there. So later, of course, when I got the job and started working as a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service, one of the first trips I did was to Egypt. And so,
how cool is that? Comes full circle.
Yeah. And so I'm there, riding a camel, real atypical, right? I'm riding the camel out to the pyramids, and then I'm thinking,
but you got to do it.
Yeah, to me, it was amazing to finally, to do that, and I knew I was in the right place, and. Some of the skills I had gained from, previous travels, speaking Spanish and living abroad, I was actually able to use those on the job.
Yeah.
The way that the work has helped kind of help me be a better overlander is that when we do, like a protection mission where we're providing security for some of our personnel or someone that's visiting that's high ranking, we will need to do a lot of preparation. So things like what you have in the vehicle, how heavy the vehicle is, your gear, your communications, all those things are super key to make sure that the whole group is safe.
I would suspect navigation.
Yep.
Like primary, secondary means of navigation.
Exactly.
Couple different routes.
Yeah.
Probably makes you even better as an overlander, because you're thinking about, is this the only way in and out of here?
Correct. Even more so, like we have the technology to map out where we're going, but one, piece of, if you say technology that is key, that is the most reliable, is a person that knows where they're going.
Yeah.
So
the power of local knowledge.
Exactly. So we have, local individuals that can help guide us. We're supposed to know, but we also have local individuals that can help guide us to the specific locations. They know exactly what it's looking like. They know what wrong looks like if something is kind of off.
Sure.
They know if there's been recent rains. So right here in Kenya right now, as you see, there's been a lot of rain.
A lot of rain.
And so we've even had to, we have to continually adjust. Is there been rain in the area? Should we go another way? Those are all part of the equation.
I remember when I was trying to get through Tegucigalpa in Honduras, and the city had a reputation even when I was going through there, and I thought, my best bet is to hire a guy, a taxi driver, and tell him, here's
here's $10 and you're going to get 40 when we get to the other side of the
Yeah.
city.
Yeah.
And he was vested
Yeah.
in our success, 100%.
Yeah.
And we were able to follow him, and he knew right. And we told him, hey, we need to go to a grocery store. He knew the exact grocery store to go
Yeah.
to, and we were able to follow him all the way through the city. And we made his day, and he definitely made our day.
Yeah.
So locals for sure.
I had a similar situation when I was going through Jordan, and a taxi driver, and I wanted to. I had only had a very short time in the city, and I wanted to go to Petra and go to some of the other sites. And this guy took me everywhere, and he lived in the U.S. before.
Oh, wow. So good English and everything.
And ironically, he also had been part of the Jordanian, like, the national judo team. So he was like backed up as security for me. But he took me everywhere I needed to go, and he had that local knowledge. So I wouldn't have been able to do it as quickly as I wanted to without having someone like that.
And the context that he could provide as a citizen of the country,
Yep.
and his own passion for those places. So one of the things that I see it in your face, and when we get a chance to talk, is how much you enjoy these experiences with your family. How can you also share with people that are getting ready to travel with their kids? Maybe they're worried about traveling with their kids around the world. How can you relate some advice back to the overlanders around traveling with your family?
For my family, the decision to live abroad, right? It was a family decision. I joined I've been with diplomatic security and with the State Department for approximately 19 years. And so the way it works with us is every 2 to 3 years, we have to move from location to location. And there's a process to that. And I definitely make the family part of the process.
Sure.
So we do a lot of research on, what country we're maybe looking at. And then when the time comes to move, we're lucky that we have the logistical support of the U.S. government to help us move from place to place. But once we make it, we go all in, and I invest everyone in the process. If we're going to do a trip, I try to encourage my wife and my kids to research a little bit.
And maybe do they get a chance to kind of say, this is something I'd like to see, or
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, they definitely have their input. We're getting ready to do a trip soon, and we've tasked them to do some research on what's the top place that you want to go to, and if we
Sure.
can make it work. Because if you're just dragging the kids around and just making them, as they go to a lot of museums. There's nothing wrong with museums; they're great, but I can only take so many museums, right? So there might be
maybe even less. Yeah.
So we did a trip to South Africa, and we went to some museums, but we also did quite a bit of surfing with my kids, and made them, not made them, they wanted to do the lessons, but at the end of our time there, they just really, they loved going to Cape Town in South Africa. That was a positive experience.
Oh, it's so beautiful down there.
Yeah. But one thing is when with my job, when we go to a country, we're there for several years, and so it's also important to impress upon the others that they're also representing not only themselves and their family, but also the United States if you go in the official capacity. So I try to impress upon my children that they're almost like mini diplomats. Sure. And that they need to, behave in a certain way that's, that represents themselves in a positive light. It's been an overall great experience because we've been able to expose them to all different types of cultures and environments, and they're able to see things firsthand that they may have read about in books. I'll say that from the parent perspective, it looks sometimes like they don't always totally appreciate it,
Sure.
But I've come to see that they actually really do, because then they're referring to something later in life that when they're researching a project and actually I went to that location or I was nearby. So that's been actually really, really great.
And they become like these mini global citizens. They've been so exposed to different viewpoints, different religions, different languages, people that look different from them, and that just becomes a new normal for them. That's got to be positive.
Yeah, they also are able to dismantle these different stereotypes that may be out there. So living specifically in Africa, I mean, they've just been exposed to all the different cultures, here and in Kenya and in different parts of Africa. One of the big benefits of being in some remote locations is you have access to other countries that are nearby.
Yeah.
And if you would have asked me, how many years back, if I imagined that I would be here at this time, I would have said there's no way. So that for us is really huge, and I hope that it pays dividends down the road. I think it will.
Yeah. I suspect. Well, it probably in some ways, like the mission that you did to Colombia changed you in so many ways, I suspect. So
yeah, I think also, a lot of families might be concerned about, the location they're looking at moving to, like, do they have the things that they were comfortable with back home? And, I'm here to say that in, most of the things that you can enjoy back in the United States, if we're talking about the United States or whatever country, they probably have something the same or equivalent in XYZ country.
Yeah, you and I just had birria tacos tonight, and they were super good. They were super good.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm thinking about, I think, we took our daughter to the Nutcracker in San Diego.
Yeah.
We also took her to the Nutcracker in Tijuana, Mexico, and we also have taken her to the Nutcracker here in Nairobi. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a ballet company in in all these locations. So
how cool is that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So to get a little bit more granular, maybe a little more, advice-based around all of your experience, what are some of the foundational things that overlanders need to be thinking about when they start to do their first international trip? So for those that are listening, we're trying to frame this in the context of you've traveled in the United States, you've explored, you've gone through Utah, or you've gone through Washington State or Idaho or whatever, and now you'd like to maybe go and explore Baja California. So we're trying to frame it around the idea of I'd love to go do an international trip, and I'm thinking about doing my first international trip. So JJ, what would be some pieces of advice that you would give to those people that are just getting ready to go?
So first of all, I'm a security guy, right? So I'm always going to push being safe, and all the information is out there to help you, and you are going to have to do some homework to make sure that you're doing it correctly. I would always direct everyone to the State Department website that manages travel, because there's a lot of information in there that can help you research, requirements for passports and documents, things you should look out for on the security side. All that work has been done for you already, and you just have to spend some time to go through there. And it's very country specific. So the website is just travel.state.gov, and I know that a lot of travelers have looked at this site. The information there is very current, and there's a number of professionals that work at the U.S. embassies and consulates that make sure that it is up to date. Our biggest priority is the safety of American citizens abroad. We want to make sure they're doing it safely and they have all the information, and that it's a positive experience. If you look in there is something called S.T.E.P. And I know you're familiar with S.T.E.P. It's the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. What that is, it's a system where you can register that you're going to a specific country, and you will receive any relevant information that has to do with safety and security when you're traveling.
Yeah, you can get it by email. I
Yep.
believe you can get it by text message.
Yep. That system will provide you even with information that's emerging. So let's say you're in a country and all of a sudden there's a natural disaster. So I lived in Nicaragua for a couple of years, and earthquakes was a thing that could happen. If you are enrolled in S.T.E.P., that information is going to get pumped out to you. And the information is basically, it's developed from multiple sources. Any safety and security information is developed from the U.S. Embassy, the security personnel like myself, our consular section, our local connections to the government, local media, that all will feed into that system, and it will make sure that you're properly informed with current up-to-date information.
And as I recall, when you go in to sign up, you do provide some personal information. You also provide some itinerary-based information, so
Yeah.
which makes sense, because if there was to be something that happened, you then would at least have an idea where this person might be.
Yeah, that's correct. And I recall, when I was in one country and there was a natural disaster, I believe it was Mexico, right? And it hit Baja California. And individuals that were enrolled in that, the consulate had the ability to attempt to reach out to those people. It was basically a list of individuals that they could try to assist. And I'll tell you that, our consular officers were very dedicated to try to find those individuals. And so that is correct, right? That's the best way that you can inform the U.S. government that you're in a country in the event that something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Some other things that I think are key to have is, within that travel.state.gov specific to the country, you can gather a number of relevant phone numbers that could help you.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Emergency contact numbers, yeah.
And I always suggest to have, some sort of book that has all the relevant documents and copies, but also to have a digital backup, because we're in a digital world now. And that's a good way to have something just available in case you need it and your stuff gets damaged or lost.
Yeah, I typically will have a copy of it on my phone, like where a hard copy or a digital copy is on the phone, but then I'll also have another whole set up in the cloud.
Yeah.
That way, if you have to, because let's say you lose a passport, like that's something that does happen to people. Like if someone's in a country and they lose a passport, what should they do? What would be the next step that they should do?
So the section that can assist you it's part of the consular section at the U.S. Embassy or the consulate, and it's called American Citizen Services. And there's equivalent with other countries too.
Sure.
Like there's a Canadian services, and their role is to help Americans that get in these situations. You would want to contact them. Typically, you email them, and I know sometimes people don't want to just email; they want to call someone on the phone. But they're monitoring that email all the time, and they will set you up with an appointment. They'll get you to come in, and they're able to get you an emergency document that can help get you out of the country.
Sure.
And you usually have to fly out, and the airlines won't let you fly unless you have an actual document.
Sure.
So they can help you get set up with another passport, an emergency passport, and then you can get back and get a full validity passport down the road.
Yeah, but those are the kinds of things that happen to people. Or, another one that comes to mind is a medical emergency. Like if you're having an emergency while you're in a country, it's a good idea to let the consulate know. If it's a life-threatening emergency, it's a good idea to let them know that something's happening.
Yeah, there are officers that work in American Citizen Services. They do want to be able to assist, and they'll have things like even lists of hospitals that other Americans have gone to. What happens is if there's bad situations or practices, they're made aware of those things because the consular section, you have to understand that they're viewing things from the kind of the wide lens issues that are happening to Americans throughout the country all the time. So you as an individual traveler may have had a really positive experience in a country and had never had an issue. At the same time, the American Citizen Services and the consular section may know about things that have happened countrywide, and that kind of goes into those notices as well.
Sure.
They want to make sure that Americans are advised of everything that could happen in a country, and because that's important to know. More information is the best for you as a traveler to just be prepared in case.
And I think that's when it's so important because you could look at a country, like even some of the ones that I've traveled through, where it may be a level 3 threat. And it's good to keep it in the context of, oftentimes, that means that there are specific areas that are at that level, and it may not be everywhere. But it's really important to dig into, because I've found that it'll even be specific of we're not recommending people travel to this region.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really helpful to kind of know what to avoid.
Yeah. Yeah. So, remember that the information is feeding in, and so the interest of the U.S. government is to make sure everyone is informed as much as possible. When an area is put down as being, it's area to avoid, what essentially is saying is that the U.S. government doesn't typically go in there unless they have special security resources. Sometimes it's necessary to go into areas for different reasons, but they want to make sure that the large group of citizens are aware that, hey, something could potentially happen to you if you're in this area, so we want to make sure you're aware.
Yeah.
Anytime the U.S. government changes their security posture, anytime they kind of go on high alert, by law, they must notify all Americans that they're doing that. And I think that's important to understand from the overlanding perspective. Because I understand it, right? From the traveler, they might see and read the notices, and it looks like they shouldn't travel anywhere, right? What it is the U.S. government wants to say, hey, there's the potential for things to happen in some of these places, and sometimes those threats are specific to different groups, right? And that also is good to understand. We understand, right, that the U.S. government we're an attractive target to bad actors, whereas maybe just one person traveling by themselves may not be the most attractive target. But again, remember that if we have to make a change to our posture, we need to notify everyone that we've made a change to our posture. So I think that's the key piece to understand.
Yeah, to filter it through that perspective, that way. But I believe that the key is to be informed, because I've never had the feeling when I look on the website that it's saying don't go anywhere. It just means be aware of these things.
Yeah.
And as the threat level changes, you may want to change how you travel, which could include traveling in a convoy, making sure that you're not traveling at night, making sure you're not traveling into the areas that they're suggesting that you do otherwise. I can say from personal experiences, the times that I have gone into areas that was suggested otherwise, something interesting usually happened. And sometimes it is pretty uncomfortable. So I have found it to be pretty accurate. So
that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about overlanders going into a new country, what are some of the behaviors or I guess procedures or traveling methods of travel that you suggest people avoid? Just like these are a couple things not to do.
I think it's mostly personality driven, right? When you go into a new place, you want to show respect. You want to be respectful, and we often travel from the lens or through the lens or the perspective of us as coming from whatever country we're coming from, and we want to apply it in that new environment. And sometimes that isn't the best way to do it. Maybe best to just kind of sit back and do a lot of observation. But any sort of confrontation, right? You want to avoid sort of a confrontation. I think a lot about like driving around, right? And as we were discussing earlier, driving is like a language, right? You need to learn how driving occurs in that country, and it can change as soon as you cross the border from one place to the next. And so you want to avoid any sort of issue that leads you down the road of getting into confrontation. It's better just to try to understand, sit back, and try to observe. We often, are a little loud when we go into new countries.
Sure.
And I noticed this from sitting back and looking how others are looking at, foreigners. So you're drawing more attention to yourself.
Sure.
You're usually dressed a little different, or you might have a different vehicle, but then you're drawing even more attention to yourself because you're being maybe a little too loud. So just, that's something to just kind of keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and some countries are very loud.
Yeah, exactly.
But many of them are not.
So if they're allowed, then join in, I guess I'd say.
You're in Italy, just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, but being respectful, is important, and you want to avoid any situation. You need to do your research. You want to avoid any situation where you're technically breaking the law. So I know sometimes maybe the law says one thing, like when you're driving around when everyone's breaking it. The problem is that the moment you break the law, you're opening yourself up to a situation where someone can kind of go after you, or you just want to basically follow the laws as much as possible. And not.
It's tempting to speed because everybody else is speeding, but in my experience, they're going to let 6 locals go by and they see that bright green overland vehicle coming at them. They're going to, and you're doing 110 and at 80, they're going to pull you over.
So you're making yourself you're opening yourself up to potentially running into an issue. Sure. I think if you're maybe breaking the law. So, and I think the one other thing is, we always want to watch, our entitlement, right? Wherever you come from, it's something that you have to constantly check with yourself, because of maybe your status or money or what you're driving. We have to always be mindful that we need to understand that things are maybe being done in a certain country for a certain reason, and it works for them. And we don't need to try to transplant, what we know to be the way things, should be to that new environment. So I think it's best to just always check that entitlement, make sure that we're good. That's viewed negatively, I think, in many places around the world. I'm talking universally.
Yes.
Try to say hi, try to kind of link up with that culture the best way you can.
Learn a couple pieces of the language. Tell them thank you, tell them hello in their own language and a smile. And look them. Don't have your expensive sunglasses on if you can avoid it. Look them in the eyes.
Yep.
And especially when you're coming up to traffic stops and stuff like that, get those aviators off, and because they may want them. That's the problem. You may not leave the traffic stop with those aviators if you're not careful. So,
if you get stopped, right, that officer, and I always try to relate the best way I can. Sure. Right. I'm technically I'm a federal officer as well. Sure. And I try to find common ground the best way I can. That person, for many reasons, could not be having a good day. They've had a negative experience in the past. If you're able to deconstruct those barriers by just saying hi and asking them their name or asking them how their day's been going, maybe that's going to help you and go your way.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, even when I was an officer at Gila Bend Auxiliary Field in Arizona. Yep. You know where that's at.
I know exactly where it's at.
And I just remember how that felt, when you pull somebody over and they are pissed at you, even though they were doing something wrong. Yeah. So it's important to remember that. Yeah, for sure. Well, those are some really, really good insights. What mistakes do you find travelers make bringing stuff into countries? One of the things that I'm aware of is making sure that the prescription drug that you're on in the United States is actually allowable. Yeah. And I'm fortunate that I take a cholesterol medication, so I don't bring anything else with me. But there, in the United States, a wide range of pharmaceuticals can be prescribed, and they may not be allowed, or they may be controlled substances in the country that you're visiting.
Yeah, I know growing up on the border that, something that it's allowed in Mexico, there's certain ways to bring that into the United States, right? They might need a doctor's prescription. Sure. And I learned that early on, right? When you have to ask the questions to be sure. Anything that could create questions about you, I think, are good to know to avoid. So I know, again, I'm a security guy, so it's, some people get in trouble for having certain lengths of knives, for example. So if, you should research what's the actual law, and maybe you print it out. So if you get stopped, then that officer may not understand the own law. That's maybe one thing to have.
You could show due diligence, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Australia is that way.
Yep.
I mean, just certain any kind of mechanical assist of a folder. I mean, something that you and I could carry around in Arizona or Utah or whatever is no big deal. But if you have something that is mechanically assisted or you can open up one-handed oftentimes are not legal.
Yep.
They usually require it to be a minimal length and require sometimes two hands to open,
Of course, you touched on the drugs, right? Obviously, illegal drugs would be a bad thing
that's
to
a super bad idea.
to have on you. But people make mistakes all the time, so it's not uncommon to hear about someone getting hung up for having drugs, or for example, a drug may be legal in the state in which you came from in the United States, but it's not legal technically in like Mexico, for example. That's something to watch out for. In some countries, things that are offensive could create issues for you. So offensive type material could be technically illegal in that country, so you don't want to bring something that can cause that problem for you as well. And then in depending on some countries, some advanced electronic equipment could be viewed in the negative way, and they could think you have other objectives that could hang you up and create issues for you as well. So you should definitely know what equipment you have with you and be able to explain what it is and show how it works. That could help eliminate issues.
And making sure if it does require a permit that you've gone through that process.
Yeah.
You can't have a sat phone in Sudan. You can't have a sat phone in Chad. You can't. I mean, you can. I can't. But there are places where you're not allowed to have those things. So making sure that you've got some insights around it.
One I know that has hung up some people is drones, for example. Yeah. So you should know the rules about bringing drones into a certain country.
Yeah.
There may be restricted fly areas, or you can't bring them in the country. Yep. And if you're doing international travel, multiple stops, you need to check including transit countries. Yep. Because that transit country could you could get hung up in that transit country even though your final destination is another country. So do your research, of course, and
totally happened
be aware.
to me. We talked about that the other day when I went from Europe into Morocco on my way to Australia, and I had a drone with me.
Yeah.
And they found it in Morocco, and it was amazing. But the Comandante guy, I mean, he took the drone. He says, when you come back through the airport, I'll have it in my office. And believe it or not, he did. Like, he gave me the drone back. So, but that usually does not happen that way. I feel like I was very fortunate.
Yeah.
So, you really want to do your research. I mean, and another thing, too, is even the things that you're wearing. So being mindful of, is a watch that you're wearing going to signal something to someone that makes you more of a target? If you're wearing, even guys wearing shorts in certain countries is considered disrespectful. It's just purely disrespectful, and they may view that way. They're not likely going to beat you up, but they may treat you differently because they know that you're going out of your way to say, I don't agree with your culture, and I'm going to do whatever I want. So.
Or people in your party. And then if you're the guy and you're trying to, protect the other person with you, or you could end up putting yourself in a situation that you didn't anticipate,
right?
And that you could have avoided by just, maybe dressing a little bit different,
sure,
or a little more conservatively. Could help. There's definitely places around the world where it's polar opposite, right? Sure. It swings a lot. So yeah,
of course. But it's good to be mindful of that when you go into those places. So what are some things, just to flip the question, what are some things that you do recommend people bring or think about bringing that can help them as travelers?
So I'm really big on communication. So the way that we do a lot of our planning is we have basically 4 tiers of communication. We have a primary, an alternate, a contingency, and an emergency.
Sure.
So that's going to be, that's the way you call for help. That's the way that you can, get resources that you don't have. So I really recommend that when you're doing your travel, you plan for, that primary may be just like a cell phone,
sure,
or like a radio. Your alternate may be internet-based communication through the different platforms. Your contingency or your emergency could be a sat phone or maybe like an inReach system that has two-way communication. Mm-hmm. So make sure that you have that squared away in addition to your mechanical and your medical. So I know we always talk about having, you can only take so much with you, right? Because you're weighing down the vehicle. But, if you're going to very remote locations, you may have medical equipment you bring with you, like a full kit, and you may not be a person that's professionally trained as a medic, but you may be in locations where there's trained professionals in the area, but they just don't have the resources. So traveling around here in Kenya, for example, there's a lot of vehicle bays and remote locations as you're traveling. I don't know that there's all the tools necessary all the time in that specific vehicle bay, but if I have the tools with me or some key tools, I know that space is available to potentially use, or there may be a Land Rover mechanic that's nearby.
Exactly.
That could help me do the work. So I think, we don't always need to think from terms of, I'm going to bring everything, but it's stuff that I know how to use. Well, if you have something that's like a larger kit,
sure,
right? Maybe there's someone nearby that can actually help you do the work or can help get you on the road again.
And having a couple spares with you, if you know that there are common failure points, bringing along syringes and other medical devices that can be used if you go into a clinic that they may not have available, or at least you can make sure that they're using something that kind of meets your expectations. Yeah, those are certainly things to consider. Yeah, having that stuff with you is important. And the communication, I find, gives not only the traveler a lot of comfort, but it gives your family back home a lot of comfort. So asking your family back home, like ask your mom or dad, like, how would you like for me to communicate with you while I'm in the middle of, South America?
Yeah.
And they may surprise you. They may be like, have a great time. Call me when you get back. Or they may be, it would feel really good to me to know once every other day how you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's where something like an inReach can really make a difference.
I think also you can plan for varying environments. So we have vast, differences of elevation here in Kenya or in different places I've been to, where you could literally be at sea level one day and you could be at, Kilimanjaro, right, at 20,000 feet. Or I've taken my truck up to parts that were 11,500 feet, and it can get really cold.
That's right.
Or as you've seen in the last couple of days, the rain will come and go on and off. So planning for all the seasons, or the best you can, and having that gear, there available and ready for you. I have a good system where I use Pelican cases in the back of the Defender. And I have a lot of things just that are always there in case. It's airtight, it's waterproof. I can use that as a bench to sit on or something to step up on, things like that.
Yeah, it's always a good idea to make sure the cases in your Defender are watertight.
Yep.
That's been my experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit around. We did talk a little bit about documentation, but what are some pieces of advice around applying for visas? What documentation should people make sure that they have with them when they cross a border? There's things that generally come to mind, like making sure you have a passport and copies of your passport and photographs of your passport. But also, if you, for example, went through global entry and you have a global entry ID, that's a good thing to bring along. It's an alternate ID. Having not only your driver's license, but an international driver's license that you can hand to officials in the countries that you're in. A lot of times people forget to bring their yellow fever card.
Yeah, because it changes by country, and from experience, the changes can go into effect immediately. You could be mid-travel, and all of a sudden there is a change in policy, and they don't want to allow you on the plane.
Yeah.
Luckily, sometimes you can get those vaccinations when you're traveling if you had to, but you want to always check the validity of your passport, right? Because I've seen individuals get hung up mid-transit because one country allowed within a 6-month validity left on your passport and others did not. So you really want to make sure that you have more than 6 months from the conclusion of your travel.
And also the number of pages can vary by country.
Correct.
You have to have a certain number of blank pages left in your passport.
I've seen people also get hung up on that. They were stuck in a country because the next country required a certain number of blank pages. I will just refer back to that travel.state.gov
It's got
website.
It does. It's got it all
But
there.
it'll list everything there, and they're saying it there because they've dealt with cases of people getting stranded or needing assistance. I really recommend, like we talked about, having copies of everything. If you get stopped by official, you can always hand a copy of that document or show a digital copy or something like that. Those are options. And when it comes to passports and visas also, so a lot of people apply for visas to go to different places. Typically, a country will have all the information on their pages as well. So sometimes people get caught up in fraud schemes because they use fixers, and those individuals aren't really acting in the best interest of the traveler.
Sure.
So it's good to look what's there, and you can check on forums and other people who have recently traveled, although those can vary, right, what it says in there. But the official pages are typically your best shot.
And a lot of those official pages are linked from the U.S. travel advisory site. I found a lot of those visa, especially since there's been such a shift towards e-visa, which is a huge deal because you used to have to send your passport into Washington D.C. for a lot of these things, which can create all kinds of complications. So,
and I know
e-visas really help.
I know that sometimes individuals have urgent travel or something comes up, and so there are ways to request an expedited appointment. And I know that people are looking at at those requests. So there are options, but it's better practice if you can plan in advance, well in ahead. Don't just assume that you'll be able to enter a country with your U.S. passport or other passport. The agreements they vary by country, from country to country, and they change.
Yeah, I've seen them change mid-travel for sure. So when people rock up to a border, because this is always, it's funny to hear travelers talk about that. It's probably the one thing that gives overlanders the most anxiety is, either a dent in their vehicle or crossing an international border. Do you have any pieces of advice for people when they're preparing to go to a border, at the border? You've crossed thousands of border crossings, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, and I worked. When my family lived in Mexico, they crossed the border every day.
Yeah.
And for a couple of years, I worked with the group at the border at San Isidro. That's the largest land border crossing in the world. There's 60,000 to 100,000 people that crossed every single day of that border. And one thing I learned is that the officers working there, they're really dedicated. They're trying to do the right thing, and there are legitimate concerns about people crossing the border, not legally. What I'll say is that when you're a person that you're working in an environment where you see people cross all the time, after a while, you develop a sense. You can kind of tell when something is maybe just a little bit off. And so if you're ever crossing and you run into an issue where you get referred for maybe a secondary sort of inspection, wherever it may be, not just the U.S. but another location, you should just consider that officer may have just seen something that was maybe a little off. And they have to process people quickly. So that's why they refer you over. Or sometimes there just may be, your name, for example. Something may ping because of your name, and that officer may...
This guy's got two first names, Scott Brady. Secondary. Can't be real.
They may not even be able to override that in the moment. And so, but, showing humanity towards that officer that's doing their job and finding a way to, just be personable, that goes a long way. I'll say that you don't want to give an excuse, again, for to give them an issue, and you got to know the rules with crossing. So I think one time I tried to cross a piñata, I wasn't even thinking about it, and there were certain rules with crossing a piñata because, again, obviously you could stuff stuff in there, and
Totally makes sense.
it was kind of funny, but I wasn't thinking about it because I brought this beautiful piñata. I was going to take it to a party, and it was kind of funny. It was a bride and groom piñata, so it was for some friends in San Diego.
Sure.
So the officer was like, I got to refer you because we have to scan those items. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
So I had the option, of course, of getting agitated or saying that I work there at the border with the group there. But no, I got to let the officer do what they're supposed to do. So, the best way you can to appeal to them, and I'll say as you're doing international crossings, having all your stuff in order, right, is the best way you can do. Very organized. If you're presenting everything in a way that makes it hard for people to, find some sort of admin thing that you didn't do and it's all there, then it just makes their job easier to just approve you and process you in.
Well, and then it just gives them some confidence that most likely the rest of you is in order.
Yeah.
Just like, for example, not rocking up to a border in a T-shirt with 6 days of spilt milk on it. Just come. You don't need to wear a suit, but just come being professional and squared away. And it's even surprising, the number of times that I've gotten a more detailed inspection when the vehicle is just trashed, when it's like dusty and muddy. It's the same thing if you come up to the U.S. border from Mexico and the vehicle is you're like, what were you doing in the desert?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in thinking also dealing with the officers at the border, I think that respect thing again is so key because, you're talking to a professional in their country. And if you think let's say you're in another country and you're dealing with an officer at a border crossing. If you think, would I talk the same way to an officer entering the U.S. or coming through, security at the airport? If the answer is no, maybe you should change a little bit that approach. And I think, again, it's hard for us sometimes. Like we have to always constantly check ourselves to make sure that we're presenting in the proper way.
And those border officials are people of influence. They are individuals of power and influence, and it's probably been very difficult for them to get that job, and they're respected in their community, and they're used to being respected by the people who come to the border, asking to enter their country.
They absolutely.
That's basically what you're doing. You're asking them to let you in.
They absolutely have power and influence over you at that moment in time.
That's right.
Yeah, so you definitely want to respect that.
Yeah, come into it with the right perspective. So, because security is one of your specialties, do you have some advice for individuals traveling? Just some practical considerations around security. Like a fun example was when you and I just went to dinner. Normally, I like to sit facing the entrance, but I'm like, I'm not the guy that needs to be facing the entrance. It needs to be you. Yeah. So I just put my back to the whole restaurant because I'm like, I'm with JJ. He's the guy who needs to be seeing what's going on.
I'm a big believer in that there's a way to make security practices part of your normal routine, and it can be done in a way where you don't think so much about it.
Sure.
So it's not good to be paranoid and constantly thinking about, the bad things that can happen. You need to be aware of the potential risks, but I always try to push. Like if there's things that you can make part of your routine, that it could actually improve your safety and security. So like for me, a big one is like driving at night, right? If I can avoid driving at night, I avoid driving at night because in certain places, it may not be well lit. Maybe there's more accidents. There's the inability of law enforcement personnel to get to you at nighttime, or the response may be slower. So if you just don't drive at night, then that will never be an issue for you.
I'd say it's number one.
Yeah.
It really is number one for overlanders.
Vehicle speed. I know you've talked about vehicle speed in the past. I feel the same way. And as you know, you drive an older vehicle like a Defender, you have to actually watch your vehicle speed a lot. That also, the conditions of where you may be, you may be in an environment where the roads themselves are not, completely engineered for the speeds that, we may be used to driving. In the United States, they have a whole system, and you can drive actually very, very fast in some parts of the country. But you may be in a place where it doesn't support that speed, and the vehicles around you may not be able to support that speed, be able to brake in time. There may be different conditions that are regular in that area.
Like gigantic car-eating potholes. Yeah.
Big potholes, cattle crossing, giraffe crossings. I mean,
That's
you
right.
name it, right?
No, it's the truth. And then you also get the random speed bump that is not signed, has no paint on it.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you and your Defender are airborne.
I've experienced that
Yeah.
a couple of times, for sure.
That's why you got to slow down. You just really do.
If you're slower, and if you have rules like you don't touch the phone when you're driving,
Yeah.
something like that, well, you're already eliminating potential situations that could put you in danger. And I always, when I'm doing remote travel, I consider how far the nearest hospital is for me.
Sure.
So if the nearest hospital is actually a flight away, or it's more than 6 hours, then I think it's important to monitor how you're driving. You've done the drive down to Baja,
Yeah.
and there's large sections in there where there's no cell signal. The nearest hospital is maybe back in Ensenada, maybe
Yeah.
Tijuana, or it's down in Cabo, and you're literally days away drive from somewhere. So how can you get the help that you need if you're so far away? So I think speed is definitely a very, very important piece.
And
But
it's something we can always control.
yes, yeah,
And I think it's there's the known knowns, there's the known unknowns, and the one thing that we do know is that if we remove some of the speed from the equation, then every scenario that may come up will be better than if you were going faster.
correct. And I always try to keep in mind who's traveling with me too. So if I have family with me, I
Of course.
take it personal that I'm responsible for them, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to put them at risk unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Right. Buddy system for me, I know that some travelers travel alone, and that's fine, and people do it for different reasons. But if there's an opportunity to bring someone along, I always try to make that part of the equation. You have more than one eye looking out for things. It's you're a group, and so that gives you a little more safety and security there as well. Communication check-ins. So if your normal procedure is that anytime you depart or you leave, or you have an automated system that does it for you, when something is not happening that way and it's off, it's going to alert people that like something may be wrong.
Yeah.
So now you have other people that are looking out for your safety, because your normal procedure is that you always check in. You always call your mom or something when you arrive to your destination.
Right. Exactly.
I think it's wise too to not go in, as we say, into the blind when we're going to location. Meaning, it's always smart to check local and social media on conditions. So if there's heavy rains, people are going to be putting stuff up there, and they're going to hashtag it to that location. And so you don't want to enter a place that is, dealing with a situation. It could be fire, natural disaster, or something, maybe
Train
criminal.
derailment. It just,
True.
it's shocking the
True.
stuff that can happen, and it normally does hit social media pretty quickly.
But a lot of people don't check. They just kind of travel and go. And checking social media, checking where your nearest, we talked already in the medical, but nearest hospitals of where you're staying. If it's just one of your proper planning procedures for your travel, you're building up your security in a way that many, I think, don't do.
Yeah.
I always go to, I research trusted locations. So I'll look and if I have the ability to call someone that's from that area to be, hey, how's this area? Especially when I travel, I'm doing Airbnb.
Yeah.
I might, see if I have any friends in that country. I'll contact them. and I'll say, hey, how's this neighborhood? Or what are people saying about this neighborhood?
Sure.
That's very smart. And we talked about having a local guide or someone local that can take you around. I mean, if you have someone that knows the environment, one of the big benefits to that is that they know what not normal looks like.
Sure.
So you may, because you're new to the environment or the country, you may not be really reading body language or things that people are demonstrating. Someone that's local may be able to kind of give you a kind of a pre-indicator.
Sure.
To something that could potentially bad happen.
Right.
I remember one time I was in a taxi and I was driving, and the window was maybe halfway down. I typically say, hey, have your windows up as high as you can, but it was a really hot day, so I had it down a little bit. And I was checking my phone, and I noticed that the taxi driver had his phone, and he took it off the cradle and he put it away. And so I was thinking, I think we're about to go through a bad neighborhood, or someplace where there's maybe like smash and grabs or something like that. And so I put my phone away,
Makes sense.
so, but if you're not paying attention, have your eyes open, you may not see some of those things.
And then when I think the next thing is, and it's not at all to make people concerned, but things can go pear-shaped. They can really go bad. I know that most of the world, those things don't occur, but what are some of the kind of standard operating procedures for if someone has a really bad car accident?
Yeah.
What should their interface be with like the U.S. Embassy or the consular office? Should they call if there's been a really bad accident preemptively? Should they send an email? What should be the procedure around bad medical, bad accident, conflict of some sort? What are some of your pieces of advice around that?
Well, I think first of all, I'm a big proponent of individuals preparing themselves the best that they can. So if there's available medical training that you can receive or defensive training that you can receive, that's just good to have, period. And no matter what, you don't ever plan to be in a situation where those skills may be called upon for yourself or others or loved ones. So having that ready is going to be your first piece to be able to deal with the situation, because you may be so far away from being able to get to help.
Yeah, don't have your medical kit at the bottom of the pile in the back of the truck. Make it accessible.
And don't let the first time you open it when there's an emergency. Know how to use that kit. There's just a lot of resources available. It's just a matter of, you may be prioritizing that you want to get some medical training. We get a lot of training, and we give training to others on, how to deal with, massive bleeding and airways and respirations, basically techniques that fall under this system called March that helps keep people alive in traumatic situations. So I'm not, a medic. I don't, have advanced training, but I have enough training where, potentially I could help sustain life until we can get someone to help. So empowering yourself through getting that training, I think that's the first piece. And then if you are in a bad situation, as calm as you can be, I think is key, because a lot of times the solutions may be right in front of you. You should be aware of your abilities to deal with certain situations. And if you have others around you, work as a team. Whether it's a security situation or a medical type situation. If you are the victim of a crime, though, or a medical situation, you should inform someone from the embassy about what has happened to you. And, you could send an email like I talked about, but, you could also call and direct if there's actual emergency situation. And typically there's a person on duty that can help talk you through the situation that you're in, and they can help either advise you or direct proper resources to you. So, they may not be able to come out to you to personally assist you, and then that might not even be their skill set, but they could say, hey, there's a good hospital in the area that can help treat you, or, they can maybe connect you to that person. Stuff happens all the time. and in other posts I've been at, there's been situations where people have even they've died, and families had to learn how to deal with that situation. And so I give the push for American Citizen Services under our consular section. It's kind of as a thankless job a lot of times, and they deal with a lot of issues every day.
And making those communications, if something significant has happened, initiating those communications as early as possible is critical, because let's say you've been in a car accident, and you're high on adrenaline, and people are injured, the vehicle's damaged.
Yeah.
You're going to want to reach out as soon as possible, because you may realize, oh, my phone's been damaged and it won't charge, or the vehicle caught fire. I don't actually have a cord or the battery, or maybe something escalates with local law enforcement, where you're not going to be able to have that opportunity to make the phone call.
Yeah.
So you want to make those communications as soon as something significant has happened, as soon as you've stabilized people, kind of triaged a little bit. You definitely want to let folks know as soon as you can, just so that somebody is aware. And maybe that's just even on the inReach, that it's just like, hey, just had an accident, this is where I'm at. Just to let people know what's going on, because if something happens, it's a way that at least they'll know where you are approximately. The other thing that can happen too is you can be, it's potential for travelers to be subject to theft and to violent crimes. Generally, what is the recommendation if someone is trying to rob you? What do you guys recommend around those kinds of scenarios?
Usually if someone is attempting to take something from you by force, they may already have the jump on you. And what I could say is, if at all possible, right, to not show resistance. They're typically compliant, because they're typically coming after something financial that you have, like a phone or some money. You can just kind of give that up right away, and you have to kind of consider that person that's trying to take something from you, they're at a heightened state, and they're anxious, and you wouldn't want to do anything that would set that person off. If you can just provide something, the phone or whatever they possibly want, that they may just go away, and then not bother you any longer. I think that there are some situations when, if someone was trying to kidnap you or something like that, and take you away, that may be a situation where you must know your abilities as well. But that may be a situation where it's appropriate for you to try to fight back or try to escape. Sometimes we're just in situations where we have no option.
And I've heard that as well. If you're in a group and someone is attempting to kidnap any number of any people of the group, that's usually the one scenario where you're better off everybody knowing that because usually nobody survives that. So
I will go back though to, and again, general practice with planning. So if you on your own decide to walk down a dark alley in an unknown part of town, had you stuck by your rules, which were I'm always at least with a group or multiple people, I'm only going to places that I know about, you've now eliminated some potential issue that you maybe later found yourself into. So I think that we can find ways to make ourselves a lot safer just through general practice.
Daytime, known locations. And these things happen so rarely, but it is important to talk about that. You don't want to try to be a hero unless you have to be, and there are very few scenarios where you have to be. You're better off giving them the wallet, give them the watch. Don't try to fight back, because that could be just enough delay that they choose to take violence into their own hands. So.
I mean, even myself with some training as a federal officer, if someone has the drop on me, I'm going to be real about my ability to counter that issue.
Right.
And so if there's
only one John Wick.
if there's a higher possibility that I just give them what they want and they won't hurt me, even if I'm ready to go, that's a better situation in my mind, because I go home at the end of the day, and anything that material I can replace.
That's right. No, that's really good advice. We're getting closer to the end here. We're not going to be able to hit all of the questions. We may have to have a part 2, which would be really fun. But and I'll be back. So I do like to always ask about favorite books, and I know that you enjoy reading yourself. So what are a couple of your favorite books that you'd recommend?
So I have a personal connection to some of these books, but so one of them it was a gift from my wife when we first got here to Kenya. Is this book called Surfing, What Surfing Taught Me About Love, Life, and Catching the Perfect Wave. So the reason I like this book is that it's about a journalist that goes on this journey, and he literally wants to learn how to surf. And he goes through different, challenges and struggles as he's learning to surf. Because surfing is hard to first learn. And I learned years ago, and it's therapeutic in many ways. The book also... it's based in Baja California, which is a place that I love and that I lived for many years and did, a lot of great things for me. Another one that I really liked, it's about these 3 contractors, American contractors that they were kidnapped by the FARC in Colombia for like 5 years. And it's called Out of Captivity, 1,967 Days in the Colombian Jungle. I just really enjoy this book because I always wonder about what I would do if I was in some sort of stressful situation. And I lived in Colombia years ago, and it was a great place to be. So that's one that was always kind of hard to put down.
I've never heard of that one. That one sounds really good.
I'll give you the copy if you want to read it. So
absolutely, I'll do that. Well, I appreciate those pieces of feedback, and then. If you were just to give a couple pieces of advice to a new overlander, kind of what would be, based upon all of your travel experiences around the world, living around the world, what's a piece of advice or 2 that you would give to someone that was new to it?
I would say don't be intimidated by the idea of traveling abroad, overseas. There's a lot of people that have done it. There's ways to do it. And I think that there's the opportunity of amazing experiences that you're missing out on by not doing it. There's different formulas to get to that same place, though. So, I totally admire folks that are able to get in a vehicle and go and live abroad. In fact, I have a buddy that's doing it right now. But that may not be the right formula for me. And so my opportunity was to work for the U.S. government living abroad. And it's been fantastic. It's given me opportunities to go to other places, to have a kind of a stable home environment, but also be abroad. And so it's just one of those things where if you're seeking it out, you could probably find an opportunity there to achieve your goals, your dreams, and it may not be in the traditional sense of what you're seeing on the Instagram or
true. And it's certainly not a competition. There is no right way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it. Everybody has their own journey that they're on. And it's important to remember that we should honor what we want to achieve and what our partner and what our travel companions want to achieve, and kind of to hell with whatever, some podcast host tells you how to do it.
No worries. I mean, I've learned so much actually from listening to your podcast. I mean, it's been it's helped guided me, especially with my my truck build and different ideas. So I just really appreciate you getting that information out there.
Oh, you're so welcome.
In the journal as well.
Well, and JJ, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for the service that you have provided to so many travelers, to dignitaries, to really important people that have traveled around the world on behalf of our government and otherwise, that you've provided safety and security for. It means a lot what you do. And I've already learned so much from our conversations, and I know that our listeners are already learning from what we talked about today. So
thank you.
We'll plan on a round 2.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
That sounds great.
All right.
Thank you, JJ.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.